Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Jawad Tehami and these are the headlines. The UN has urged for calm as Israeli forces stormed the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound after entering the ceasefire deal. In Gaza, the death toll in Israeli airstrikes has risen to 248, including 66 children. In an interview, Palestine's Foreign Minister Riyad al-Maliki said there are no guarantees that truce will hold. Meanwhile, at a news conference, US President Joe Biden said he was praying that it would last. In Afghanistan, the government claims to have killed 20 Taliban fighters, including a key commander in Baghlan province. The defense ministry says 22 others were injured during operations in Guzarga, Jalga and Baghlan-e-Jadid districts. Officials say the Afghan forces also suffered casualties without providing an exact number. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi says the resolution of the Kashmir dispute is pivotal for peace in South Asia. In a meeting with a delegation of Kashmiri leaders in New York, he expressed concerns over gross human rights violations in occupied Kashmir. He said Pakistan will continue its political, moral and diplomatic support for the Kashmiris. In Germany, authorities say people traveling from the UK will not be allowed to enter the country from Sunday. The decision was made due to a rise in cases of the Indian variant in Britain. India has once again reported around 257,000 new infections and over 4,000 deaths in a day. In Pakistan, 88 people have lost their lives to the virus, while over 4,000 tested positive overnight. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 3.4 million lives and has infected over 165 million people. Those were the headlines and detailed stories right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. The UN has urged for calm as Israeli forces stormed the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound after entering the ceasefire deal. In Gaza, the death toll in Israeli airstrikes has risen to 248, including 66 children.
After a fragile truce between Hamas and Israel, thousands of displaced Palestinians in Gaza are returning home. The United Nations has called for food, medical and psychosocial support for Palestinians sheltering at the agency's schools. In an interview, Palestine's Foreign Minister Riyad al-Maliki said there are no guarantees the truce will hold. Meanwhile, at a news conference, United States President Joe Biden said he was praying that it would last. He pledged to build a major package with other countries to help rebuild Gaza.
And I think that, my party still supports Israel. Let's get something straight here. Until the region says unequivocally they acknowledge the right of Israel to exist as an independent Jewish state, there will be no peace.
Saudi Arabia's King Salman bin Abdulaziz condemned the Israeli aggression in a phone call with Palestine's President Mahmoud Abbas. Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei called on Muslim states to help rebuild Gaza. Despite the ceasefire, tensions are still running high in the West Bank. Israeli colonists attacked several homes and injured many Palestinians in the southern city of Hebron, while Israeli soldiers injured several Palestinians in a clampdown on a protest in Ramallah.
In Afghanistan, the government claims to have killed 20 Taliban fighters, including a key commander in Baghlan province. The defense ministry says 22 others were injured during operations in Guzarga, Jalga and Baghlan-e-Jadid districts. It said a Taliban stronghold with weapons and ammunition was also destroyed. Officials say Afghan forces also suffered casualties without providing an exact number. They added that the militants left the area after reinforcements arrived. The country faces a sharp increase in violence as the US and NATO prepares to pull out troops by 11 September. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi says the resolution of the Kashmir dispute is pivotal for peace in South Asia. In a meeting with a delegation of Kashmiri leaders in New York, he expressed concerns over the gross human rights violations in occupied Kashmir. He said Pakistan will continue its political, moral and diplomatic support for the Kashmiris. The delegation hailed the foreign minister for effectively raising the issue at all global fora. Qureshi also held a meeting with the leaders of the U.S. House of Representatives Subcommittee on Asia Pacific and discussed issues concerning Kashmir and Afghanistan. Germany has banned travelers from the UK amid fears of a rise in cases of the Indian variant. India has recorded nearly 4,200 deaths from COVID-19 and over 257,000 cases in the past 24 hours. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 3.4 million lives and infected over 165 million people. More in this report.
As India records thousands of deaths daily, families of the victims find it hard to get space and firewood to perform their last rites. In northern state of Uttar Pradesh, there are more than 500 shallow graves along the banks of Ganges. Some of them are suspected to be those who have succumbed to COVID-19. India's crowded financial hub Mumbai is gearing up to get ahead of a potential third wave that experts fear could affect children. To add to the injury, 2 states have declared rare black fungus an epidemic amid thousands of cases, while the center has made it a notifiable disease.
That if you look at the blood reports of patients with COVID-19, the lymphocyte counts in the CBC comes down. And this causes a decrease in their immunity, which predisposes them to fungal infections like mucormycosis. Also, diabetes is a risk factor.
As infection levels show early signs of an increase in England, experts warn that the variant of concern first detected in India could grow exponentially in the UK. Germany has committed a further 100 million euros to the COVAX Global Vaccine Initiative. Berlin will also directly donate up to 30 million surplus doses to poorer countries. Meanwhile, the International Monetary Fund has unveiled a $50 billion proposal to end the pandemic. The plan involves vaccinating at least 40% of the population in all countries by the end of 2021 and at least 60% by the first half of 2022. This comes as UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres urged the group of 20 countries to step up.
But so far, more than 82% of the world's vaccine doses have gone to affluent countries, and just 0.3% have gone to low-income countries. The G20's Rome Declaration is a significant step to provide equal access to vaccines. But we need a follow-up mechanism backed by the political will to translate the declaration into a global vaccination plan.
The US has announced to vaccinate 550,000 South Korean service members who work with American forces. Meanwhile, Japan has expanded a state of emergency to add the southern island of Okinawa to its list of the 9 prefectures.
Pakistan has recorded 88 more deaths from coronavirus and over 4,000 cases in the past 24 hours. The health ministry says the number of fatalities has risen to 20,177. The number of infections has surpassed 897,000, of which nearly 814,000 people have recovered. The ministry says there are more than 63,000 active cases. Over 4,400 of them are in critical condition. Meanwhile, the inoculation of people aged 30 years and above is set to start from Saturday. The parliamentary secretary says the local production of the vaccine has begun at the National Institute of Health. Nosheen Hamid said CanSino jabs will be available by the end of this month. Nigeria's Chief of Army Staff and 10 other officers, including the crew, have died in a plane crash. Lieutenant General Ibrahim Atahiru took up his post in January in an overhaul of the military's top brass. The army says the plane was trying to land in bad weather at Kaduna International Airport, while in a statement, the presidency said Atahiru was on an official visit to the northern state. It has faced security challenges in recent months. Meanwhile, the Air Force says it is investigating the cause of the crash. Nepal's President Bidya Devi Bhandari has dissolved parliament and fixed general elections in November. Both caretaker Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli and opposition leader Sher Bahadur failed to form a government by the Friday deadline. The presidential order says the first phase of elections will be held on November the 12th and the second on November 19. It said the decision was made on the recommendation of the cabinet headed by caretaker PM Oli. Oli dissolved the parliament in December, but it was reversed by the Supreme Court in February after weeks of protest. The recent announcement has plunged the country into fresh political turmoil amid a worsening COVID-19 outbreak. In Myanmar's Sagaing region, one of the anti-coup ethnic factions has attacked military positions in the jade mining town of Hamti. With this move, forces of the Kachin Independence Army have taken new territory. The group's spokesperson confirmed the attack, while local media says fighting is still ongoing. It said the targeted site is near a mining venture that involves a military-owned conglomerate. Meanwhile, Myanmar's junta leader said deposed leader Aung San Suu Kyi was in good health. In his first interview since the coup, Min Aung Hlaing said Suu Kyi will face court in the coming days. Myanmar has been in chaos since the military seized power, with security forces killing over 800 people during the protests. US President Joe Biden is willing to meet North Korea's Kim Jongun if he agrees to discuss his country's nuclear program. Biden said this after meeting his South Korean counterpart Moon Jae-in in Washington. The US president said his advisors must first meet their North Korean counterparts to lay the groundwork for talks. He said Washington consulted Seoul throughout its Pyongyang policy review. For his part, the South Korean president appreciated what he called the calibrated and practical US approach. Moon also said the two agreed to work together for peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait. They also considered special characteristics in relations between China and Taiwan. U.S. officials say Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin was unable to speak to China's top general despite multiple attempts. The Pentagon says it wants a dialogue with Beijing, but at the proper level. Officials say it is hard to know if this lack of communication is due to strained ties or China's stubbornness. There was no comment from the China's embassy in Washington. Relations between the two are tense, with differences over Taiwan, South China Sea, and human rights. In the United States, 2 people have been killed and 8 others wounded following a mass shooting in downtown Minneapolis. Authorities say the shooting involved a dispute between 2 men who both pulled out guns and started shooting at each other. One of the victims is still in critical condition, while 7 others have injuries not considered to be life-threatening. No arrest has been made yet. More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. The UN says embargo violations and delay in the withdrawal of the foreign mercenaries threaten hard-won gains in Libya. In a briefing to the UN Security Council, Special Envoy Jan Kubis called for a timely withdrawal to address instability. He called on the Libyan authorities and institutions to live up to responsibilities and build on progress made in past months. Cuba said the ceasefire continues to hold, but there is no progress on reopening the coastal road between Surat and Misrata. He said further delays could undermine efforts to implement the truce and advance the political transition. He also called on the House of Representatives to clarify the constitutional basis for holding free, fair and secure elections. Ethiopia has for the first time accused troops from Eritrea of killing 110 civilians in the war-hit Tigray region in November. The Attorney General's office says Eritrean troops killed 40 civilians during home-to-home raids. In a statement, it said the investigation shows that 70 civilians were killed in the city. The office contradicted law enforcement officials who claim a majority of those killed were fighters, not civilians. Ethiopia's military prosecutors have also pressed charges against 28 soldiers suspected of killing civilians in Tigray. Last year, fighting between the federal government and forces in Tigray claimed thousands of lives while displacing more than 1 million. The world's 7 richest countries have agreed to stop international financing of coal projects by the end of this year. Environment ministers from the G7 made the announcement after a virtual meeting. The G7 and the EU decided to phase out support for all fossil fuels to meet the global climate crisis targets. In a communique, they said they will work with other partners to accelerate the deployment of zero-emission vehicles. They also reiterated their commitment to the 2015 Paris Agreement and to control the rising temperatures. Demonstrators cycled in Zurich to call for action on climate change for the first time since the pandemic. Hundreds of others waved banners and marched through the streets despite the COVID-19 restrictions. They called for more local democracy to ensure a more sustainable society. According to the organizers, around 30,000 people took part in the strike at 100 locations across Switzerland. The European Union says 2020 has been the hottest year recorded on the continent. In India, toxic foam floating in the Yamuna River, the main source of water in the Indian capital, has left residents of New Delhi concerned. The Central Pollution Control Board says 70% of the pollution in the river is human excrement and industrial effluents. Residents are demanding immediate action from the government to control the pollution level. They say it looks like a drain and the migratory birds that used to come have also reduced. The Yamuna fulfills 60% of New Delhi's water needs, but almost the same percentage of the city's sewage finds its way into the river. In China's southwestern Yunnan province, at least 3 people have died and 28 others injured after a 6.4 magnitude earthquake shook Delhi. State media says an emergency has been declared and rescue operations are launched in the city. The China Earthquake Networks Center says the quake hit at a depth of 8 kilometers and was followed by aftershocks. Authorities said the collapse of some roads along with landslides cut off transportation lines. Meanwhile, a magnitude 7.3 quake has also struck the Chenkai province in western China. However, there were no reports of casualties or damage in the sparsely populated area. China has become the first nation to orbit land and deploy a land vehicle on its inaugural mission to Mars. A remote-controlled motorized rover, Zhurong, drove down the ramp onto the surface of the red planet. It has 6 scientific instruments and will study the planet's surface, soil and atmosphere. The China National Space Administration says Zhurong will also look for signs of ancient life, including any subsurface water and ice. Powered by solar energy, the rover will use a ground-penetrating radar during its 90-day exploration of the Martian surface. In Peru, 2 Andean bears have been spotted at Machu Picchu. They caught this rare opportunity for sightseeing due to the absence of tourists amid the pandemic. The mother and her cub strolled through the ruins of this 15th century Incan citadel near the edge of Peru's southern jungle. The Andean bears, also known as spectacled bears, are the only bears found in South America. They live in the Andes and the outlying mountain ranges from western Venezuela to Bolivia. The species is classified as vulnerable by the International Union for Conservation of Nature. In France, Patrick Willis owns a sanctuary for lions, bears and laboratory primates southwest of Paris. Now he is planning an extension before a ban on circus animals comes into effect. More in this report.
Willis plowed 25 million euros of his own money into a sanctuary for lions, bears and laboratory primates. One pair of lions was rescued from Spain, where their owner paraded them for tourists to take photographs on beachfronts and in nightclubs. Their claws had been ripped out and they had no mane after being castrated at birth. In another enclosure lives a macaque who was subjected to experiments related to neurological diseases for most of her 22 years. After she picked lice off another monkey, she would have been euthanized if the sanctuary had not taken her in.
Canelle, c'est la doyenne, elle est rentrée d'une cage de laboratoire.
Canelle is the oldest macaw we have. She was put in a lab cage when she was 2 years old. She worked for 3 study cycles on Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's. Canelle still has 15 years to live. She must be 22 now, but I don't see her age because I love her so much. Her life was taken from her for 19 years to work for us. So if we humans don't owe her retirement instead of euthanasia, what are we doing on Earth?
Viola says his facility is a refuge above all for animals that need it when there is no other solution. Now that France has banned circus animals, Viola says numerous circus owners have called to reserve space at the shelter. Paulo Teixeira is a former circus trainer who now works at Viola's animal refuge.
I really don't know of any other place where you can have this many animals. Because there are places for tigers, places for monkeys, but we can accommodate any kind of animal, from elephants to tigers and cats. Everything. What we want is to help animals.
The ban will be phased in over 5 years once the new law, now with the Senate, comes into effect. There are some 80 traveling circuses in France with more than 200 big cats, elephants, hippos, wolves, and other animals. Viola says his is one of the 3 sanctuaries able to look after wild animals and the only one with spare capacity.
In the U.S., more than 1,200 film and television memorabilia are set for auction in June at the Prop Store in Santa Clarita, California. More in this report.
The Prop Store says they have got something for everyone as they arrange their biggest ever auction. Bidders will be able to view the full catalogue of items via Zoom and make their purchases online and by phone globally. Among the hundreds of items, collectors will find memorabilia from films like Terminator 2: Judgment Day, Batman, Elf, Top Gun, and The Muppets, to name a few. Harry Potter's wand and eyeglasses worn by Daniel Radcliffe promise to be one of the most sought items.
This is the first time that the Warner Brothers Archive has released Harry Potter's wand and glasses to auction. The exciting part for this as well is that 100% of the Hammer Price proceeds for these 2 pieces are going to go to charity, and both of them are valued at $30,000 to $50,000 each. So we're really hoping that the charity gets a lot of help from this auction.
Truck says fans should not be discouraged by the price tag on these items. The Prop Store has collectibles for all budgets from the price range of hundreds of thousands to the low hundreds.
Such as these background shoes from the movie Elf. These will be in the lower range of prices, but the hope is that with 1,300 lots, anybody that's a fan of these films can come and walk away with something that they love.
The Prop Store says the live auction over 3 days is worth in excess of $6.1 million.
Another weather situation from around the globe. And that is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus News.